Margaret, I wanted to, as a next topic, talk about open architecture. Could you describe a little bit what you mean? I know this is a topic close to your heart, so if you could give us an introduction and your and the Red Hat view on open architecture a little bit.
I would love that. Yeah, so I was actually all prepared to talk about Red Hat's transformation, but you didn't ask me, so I'll just blend that into this answer. Because we've actually, I mean, people think vendors don't evolve, but we're going through the same thing ourselves, right? But from open architecture, you know, at the heart is really, you know, a vision that we call open hybrid cloud. And it's something that we've talked about for years. The amazing thing is we're actually achieving it now because of all the technologies that have been built around, you know, not just Red Hat technologies, but really in the ecosystem, as someone mentioned. And so when I think about open architecture, there's a couple key principles that I think are really important. One is that infrastructure really becomes ideally an abstraction layer for developers, for customers, for lines of business. And what I mean by that is the technologists that are running operations and infrastructure need to start thinking about the fabrics of their infrastructure in a way that both standardizes things so you can scale, you know, just, you know, assures security, creates, you know, dynamic processes for updating, but no one should care what's behind that. So in open hybrid cloud, you could be in, you know, a traditional data center, a private cloud, you know, a virtualized environment, a public cloud, multiple public clouds. Someone mentioned the multi-cloud strategy, and the experience should be the same. So how do we achieve that? That's where the architectural strategy and approaches and the platforms that you choose, the technologies and tools you choose become really important. So how do you look at your infrastructure in a way that, you know, starts to standardize, whether it's, you know, operating systems, virtualization, your orchestration layers. So a lot of people are betting on Kubernetes. How do you make it so everything is containerized, which allows that portability? And then how do you think about the experience in? So how do developers just have the tools and the services they need to build awesome applications and don't care where they are? They should not have to worry about whether they're on, you know, AWS or Azure or your private cloud. It should be the same experience. That's the ideal, all the way out to the edge, by the way. So with open architecture, you should be able to use this modular dynamic infrastructure on a sensor for IoT, right? I mean, we're putting Linux on the smallest chips in cars, right? So the way we think about technologies changes, and it literally goes across all of these environments. But it starts to be really important, the decisions you make and where do you standardize and where do you provide agility. So I'd love to hear what other people have to say, but that's how I think about open architecture. And of course, I should add, I'm assuming, you know, open APIs, I'm assuming integration, I'm assuming, you know, data movement and all of those things. And I guess the only thing I would add that's really important in this discussion are dependencies, that as we're looking at architectural approaches, there's, and this kind of goes to the comment earlier about cloud first, is that we often think, oh, I'm just going to put everything in the public cloud. And in open architecture, you want to think about what are all those dependencies that we have for a single application or a data source, because nothing is an island that you can just put somewhere. And increasingly, we have so many dependencies. So how do you build that into your architectural approach and strategy in this open digital world?
Okay, great question. Lee, you're the chief architect of You must have very strong.
He's going to say that sounds perfect. I want that.
That sounds perfect. It's absolutely brilliant. No, I think it's interesting. Actually, I think what you've touched on is definitely. My previous role was at Experian, right? And we were doing pretty much that same thing. So which I'm sure you're well aware of, which is absolutely that abstraction layer that leveraged Kubernetes as that backbone of trying to abstract what was there. I think the reason why we were doing it in that context was actually, you know, we had a probably 35-year-old mainframe which was running a core of a you know, financial services business that wasn't going to go away quickly. So the transformation was a very controlled transformation. It was a two-modal. And therefore, actually being able to be hybrid multi-cloud alongside that in the transformation, it was back to your dependencies. It was about which workloads needed to run co-located with the thing that we couldn't get rid of quite yet, right? versus the things that were actually going to be cloud native. And getting that balance right was core to how we met the service levels for our clients as we went through the transformation, with the end result being, well, we know that we can move the workloads elsewhere. So we're on the right path, and we're going to end up in a known end state. But actually, the technology actually allows you to support that transformation. Margaret, what's your view?
Yeah, no, you brought up a really good point that we should definitely talk about, which is nobody, I assume on this call, but any large enterprise or government has technical debt, and mainframes are still everywhere, especially in FSI and many different industries. So it's unrealistic to say, oh, just move all that over. And so how do you keep the things you need to keep there and not worry about it so much, but start to transform some of those pieces, or have even a lot of companies are putting awesome digital front ends, and still the data sources are still sitting in the mainframe, and that's okay. Yeah. There's no there's no right answer. But I love what you just said, because you talked about transformation has a destination, or at least a vision. And so I'm curious, like, how did you describe that destination as you said it then, and what are you doing now around that?
Yeah, so I think I'll use dunnhumby in terms of what we're trying to set as a destination. So I think it's pretty clear that we're a customer-centric business, right? It's not about trying to support people in and choosing the right customers for the products. It's actually choosing the right products for the customers, right? So it's all about customer centricity. But so that's kind of one of the core foundations of why are we doing it, and which you talked to before. But I think in terms of the destination, we're very clear that the core of our business is based on data, right? I mean, I think Rudi said it earlier in terms of being the kind of electricity of the business, or the lifeblood, or whatever you want to use. But the core for us was to get the foundation of the data right. So we definitely have a core data platform that is all about getting that data right and transformation. And we can talk, I could talk at length on that, but and then it underpins two parts of the business, right? Which is a product-centric business, much more a standard application development stack, but then another side which is a core of how do we underpin our analyst and science community, both the one internal to our business and the one in our clients. So that kind of set the foundations of what we're trying to do.
I love that.
Great. Massimo, Ángel, you want to jump in here in the discussion?
Yes. For me, when we speak about this aspect, architect and infrastructure are two different things. When we speak about architect, we are in a logical level. And when we speak about infrastructure, we are in a physical level. In the logical level, it's very, very important to speak about relationship before technology, because in this moment we are redesigning our ecosystem in our company and outside our company. In my case, for example, I have to understand my supply chain, my provider, but also a competitor. In Italy, we have Netflix, but also Google, other player that manage digital contents, and the others. Inside the company, it's important to have a relationship with all the different areas. For me, it's very different to manage a newsroom for a journalist, or a corporate, or a production sector to realize our format. And another sector, HR. Because we are changing the mode to support our process in our company. This is very interesting, because in this layer we are architect, not technology approach, and we can redesign our ecosystem to be in a relation with the other ecosystem. When we implement the architecture, we can speak about technology. I think that today, big company like RAI or other telco provider, finance, bank, cannot influence some evolution. For example, cloud. We cannot choose cloud yes, cloud not, but we can only manage this transformation. For me, it's very important to have a multi-cloud because we have to manage these phenomena, this transformation, to have an hybrid technological infrastructure to integrate on-premise solution and on-cloud solution. And we have to redesign also our product, our process, using this solution. For example, in my company, in this moment, the product is not digital because we use a file, but because we are rethinking our format, rethinking our television product.
Okay, thank you, Massimo. Rudi, you want to chip in? And I would also like to bring up some questions. Maybe Luca can join us later on how architecture can help us to standardize the technology, the different layers that we work with.
Yes, of course, you cannot ignore cloud. You cannot ignore the open hybrid solutions and everything around it. I liked what Massimo said. We have to manage the transformation. You cannot ignore the transformation. So I completely right. I agree with Massimo. On the other hand, also for me, cloud is not a goal by itself. It's a meaning. It's a way how you are doing things. And it should have a purpose. It should have a value, an added value. And the things we are struggling the most with, we are working with an IBM mainframe, and we have developed our own core on a mainframe in COBOL, which is working perfectly, by the way, and it's very robust and can be very scalable. But on the other hand, if we want to move to the cloud, we're always confronted with a few things. First of all, the regulator. Every time again, we have to have the same discussions again about the regulator, what can be on a public cloud, what cannot be on a public cloud, how it should be encrypted, who should own the passwords to decrypt, and all this kind of boring stuff. Another thing is about the price. I haven't seen it becoming cheaper yet, to be honest. And the third thing is about, I hear you saying, Margaret, that you can have your core data still on your mainframe or whatever. That doesn't matter. It does matter, because then you will not save clouds, because you have to copy, you have to have APIs and CPUs on your mainframe when you have to deploy things on the cloud. So there are still a lot of things to tackle. But
Absolutely.
of course, we are going to it. We have to manage it. We will manage it. I'm very curious what will be the position of IBM now with Red Hat. Will Red Hat bring IBM mainframe to the cloud?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that one. When can I
and I think containers will have a very key role.
Absolutely, they will. That's right. I agree with that. We could talk about that all day long. I'm not going to make a corporate positioning, but I think the whole point is that whether it's Red Hat or anyone else, that there are technologies now that allow us to start to move those things to the cloud. And my point on keeping the data there is that I don't think we have to say throw out the baby with the bathwater with our mainframes, that there are things that can stay there, but obviously we've got to provide ways to integrate or enable those data sources to provide the intelligence and insights we need. And the question is, there are different ways to do that, but I don't think it's an either or mentality. We can make more choices because there are technologies that allow us to take those baby steps towards the future.
Ángel, I can imagine you as being the corporate CIO, you are responsible for standards and so on in the company. So how do you manage that?
Okay, well, I will divide the discussion into two things. No? One is, as you say, the architecture standards that we have to follow. No? And for us, it's dependent also the way you are going to develop your processes. No? In our case, starting for the products, we use to get vendor platforms. No, the idea we are not in the first thing, we are not thinking in develop ourselves, but in the data-driven processes or needs. No, but in the general time when we are going to develop our commercial system or our network systems, we to try to think in order to develop with the software vendor platforms. So in this way, that's the requirement that we are putting in this case is the application. No? That these kind of tools has to be exposed, and we have to use APIs in order to be connected and to be exposed all the information with everywhere. And that's the point. In the what we call the custom development, we can do it for customer engagement or user experience, and then in this case, yes, we can do our own coding and have our standards, because we will talk later, I suppose, which kind of tools we are going to use it for this thing, and then for our infrastructure architectural that we were discussing before. When we said that we are cloud first, I think all the new developments, the new things that we are going to deploy has to be based on cloud native things. Of course, there are some tools that they are not ready yet for these kind of cloud native things. For example, HIP or the kind of things that they cannot run directly in cloud first. But meaning cloud first is not meaning public cloud. For us, cloud first is meaning private cloud or public cloud. And what is dependency of this is for us the two drivers are the performance and the latency. For example, all our network systems, we are not thinking in deploy to the public cloud in this moment because the latency is not able to post. No? In that case, what we are doing, and we are doing something, is that we are bringing our hyperscalers to our CPD. So we have signed a contract with Google, with Azure, in order that they are going to deploy their node, the Spanish node, in this case, in our Telefónica CPD. So then we can put the cloud close to us in order to develop a public cloud approach with our core systems that they need a lot of latency. And that's the point that we are thinking.
Good. I would like to invite Luc Hendricks to the conversation, because the chat and the Q&A is quite active. So Luc, if you could launch a couple of the most urgent questions here to the panel.
Well, I think the first question is a question for Margaret. So we have a question from Alexander Ramos in the group. And Margaret, you talked about open hybrid cloud. And Alexander would like to know, do you see most providers aligning on the same standards for this open architecture using public cloud, or how will this work then?
That is a wonderful question. The simple answer from the public cloud providers is no. So they are motivated mostly to, have you do as much as you can within their public cloud. It is starting to change. We are seeing improved collaboration, but I don't think we're going to see the collaboration across the public clouds. Where you're seeing it is with vendors, like Red Hat, that are providing those platforms, Kubernetes, orchestration platforms, Linux platforms that allow you to have that choice and portability. So I think that for everyone, it's a different choice. But if it works for you to put everything in a single public cloud, great. But I think that Ángel just talked about the fact that they're looking at which environment is right based on the criteria for that application or that data, and ideally, that's the choice that you want to have. You want that flexibility. So what I would just say is, as you're thinking about how to move to the cloud, which everyone is trying to do, whether it's to save cost or it's for that agility or whatever, to put the data where it needs to be, get it closer to the users. Think about the end game, right? Don't put everything in there and not think about, what if I need to get that data out? Or what if I need to have a dependency with something that's on premise? Or what if I need to do something more on the edge? So look at technologies that provide that ability for you to have that portability. And then let go of some things. If your developers want to use a certain cloud because it has the tools, think about, well, which applications does that make sense and it doesn't break anything? But the way you do that is to look at how to have those fabrics, like we talked about, those standardized layers that give you that choice, so you're in control of that and you don't lose control because everything is in a single public cloud.
Okay.
I'd love to hear some examples maybe from the panel of how they're thinking about that. We talked about Kubernetes being a key one, but Ángel just talked about, looking at that multi-cloud. I think someone else did too. So I'd be curious how they're thinking about that and having more choice and flexibility so they don't get locked in or get stuck with high costs.
So, and in that sense, the infrastructure moving up, and for those of us that are still educated with the good old Aussie model, so infrastructure is moving more in the application layer.
No, I love that. Yeah, we could talk about the OSI stack all day long. That's my foundation. But I think the thing to think about is, you know, as you're moving to the cloud, like you said, where do you need the agility and where do you need, you know, more of the standardization, so to speak, like we talked about. So I think also that one of the things that the public cloud is driving across the industry, which is very positive, is more services-based delivery. So whether you call it managed services or hosting, which we used to call it, it's all the same, where you don't have to manage it. So, you know, you don't always have to go to a public cloud now to do that. More and more vendors are providing that same experience, but it isn't necessarily in public cloud.
Okay, Rudi, you wanted to chip in? Oh, sorry, Lee.
I was just going to say, Margaret, I think one of the really important things in that is not just that we're choosing what layer you want that in, but also how you allow the development teams to engage and how we drive that. It's very much about their experience, but also overall in the architecture you're driving, how do you decouple things in order to allow pace and innovation in those areas?
Yep.
Rudi, you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I completely agree with Lee and Margaret is saying. You have to find the right trade-off of having the open hybrid cloud versus if you go native to one cloud with all the services available for that cloud. And here you have to find the right balance between what the developers are wanting, because what they learned or what they are experienced with, and what is needed from an architectural point of view. Like also Massimo said, it's about the relationship with all the rest. So the best is not always the best.
And we haven't talked about that, but I was just going to add, sorry, Hendrik, I was just going to add, we keep touching on developers, but I think it's really important because just like every company is a technology company, we're all competing for the same developer resources, right? So how do we do that with still, you know, providing what our organizations need to be successful? It's a difficult balance.
Okay, I'm conscious that Lee is gonna have to leave us for another meeting in 5 minutes. Lee, I wanted to touch on with you on not only the architecture level of infrastructure and so on. So you also have a big emphasis, of course, on data architecture. Lot you explain a little bit how that's organized in dunnhumby?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as I say, it grew up as a services business, so really it had a lot of data fed in. I mean, billions of transactions a day from retailers all around the world. And I guess we're in the really fortunate position, and I'll come back to why I think it's fortunate in the sense that we saw a lot of variation, right? We've got 30 years of experience of differences in the data across a lot of retailers, understanding deeply how that data behaves and what the challenges are within it. And our architecture was really to drive consistency in that in order to be allowed the other layers to have more flex and more ability to innovate and also reuse. So our data platform takes that differences and consolidates it down to a core model that underpins both our science and our products. And that was core in order to be able to simplify in order to drive innovation. The reason why I think that challenge we had, which was, you know, we're through and all clients are migrated on, but I think the reason why it was an opportunity is that, you know, it drove new services within our business as well, right? So the things that we learned through, you know, taking the 30 years of knowledge and the variation across all of the inputs we had allowed us to build new products and services. So we've got data consulting services that are based around trying to take that insight about retailers and actually take that insight into the retail industry and actually say, what can we tell you about your data, you know, regardless of whether you're trying to onboard within dunnhumby. But obviously it also drives, you know, shorter lead times and a faster time to market as well.
Lee, I can imagine that data was core from the beginning in your business model, but if I have to give a testimonial of my side at KBC, a few years ago, besides the transactional data and the transactions itself and the booking of it, data was more or less only needed for marketing campaigns, which has to be in batch and mostly end-user computed. And now when data is the new electricity and data becomes also core in our processes and services and functionalities, we have struggled a lot to get that industrialized, to be honest, because the SLAs were not right there. The data architecture was not fitting for it.
No,
we're catching up. Just a question to the other panels: do you struggle with the same issues, or are we the only one with that?
Everyone does. I can tell you that every CIO I talk to, they don't even know where all their data is. Right? It's
how is that in a 115,000 people company? How well organized is your data then?
Well, it's not easy. We have created what we call a fourth platform. That is that all the data is going to be there. So we are doing a huge process of standardization, because the problem is not just the container or the big data space that you are going to have. It is that you have to get the structured data from the different countries that you are going to work. So we have created what we call the URM, that is Unified Repository Management. So we ask for the countries in order to give the commercial data, financial data, every kind of data in a structured way, and then we move them to a local data warehouses, so big data in each country, and then we upload them in a corporate big data process, and when we have already together, then we can expose via API and wherever in order to be consumed by different applications or even for other industries or whatever. That is the ideal thing. Then we are in the way to do it, no? Of course.
Yes, we have the same approach. In fact, also for us, the data is the core of our infrastructure. We have 4 blocks. One is the classical IT platform to support our process, like SAP, but also IBM mainframe, because also as we have many process on a legacy system. The second one is the IoT platform that for us it's a new border in this moment to develop a new application for energy, for other aspects of our TV production center. The third one is the external ecosystem, because we need a lot of data from external, like Twitter, Facebook, but also Nielsen, for example, for our public television. And the other one about our Citizen CRM platform and so on. These 4 blocks, I think that can go on a multi-cloud, but the data in this moment in my company are on-premise, because with this data we can develop our business intelligence, and through this data we can design our neural networks to develop our application for artificial intelligence. It's very important when we speak about digital culture. A digital media company is a data-driven company, and if I work in a data-driven company, the data is the core. The data is the asset of my company.
Okay. That's a nice remark, Massimo. Maybe just to add to that, we recently organized, we call it KBC University, which is a training program for us, for the top 300 of the whole KBC group about data. So everybody gets inspired by what is possible with artificial intelligence, what is needed by, and I think it's needed. But now we're already tackling culture, so I should shut up, I think, Hendrik.
Okay, Lee, I would like to thank you for jumping in and on such a late notice, and thank you for your contributions to this panel. And
thanks all. Have a great discussion.
Thank you.